Now turning briefly to Australia Post, where the standoff between celebrity CEO Christine Holgate and Prime Minister Scott Morrison continues. The latest is a fiery legal letter from Holgate's team fired off to the federal government. Her lawyers say there are no legal grounds for her to stand down as CEO for gifting Cartier watches, and that bad political optics is not a valid reason to go. They also said she was humiliated in question time. Now, the Australian's business journalist Jared Lynch, who used to work at Australia Post, joins me now. Jared, thank you. Does this legal letter indicate that Christine Holgate simply isn't going to leave quietly, that she's going to fight for her job? And where do you expect this will end?
Well, first of all, Sharri, I did work at Australia Post, and maybe I wasn't a high enough executive, but I definitely didn't receive a Cartier watch. And I'm kind of glad I didn't, looking at the way the events have transpired in the past few weeks. But clearly, Christine does intend to fight Sharri. Otherwise, why issue a statement by her lawyers? Where it will end, I think it's hard to see her surviving in the role, given the comments from the Prime Minister, and also given the comments of Anthony Albanese, who told the New Daily that her position was now untenable. So, just looking at that current climate, it's, who knows, the investigation may prove otherwise, and stranger things have happened, but the way it stands now, it's kind of hard to see her continuing in that role beyond 4 weeks.
I mean, it's pretty extraordinary if she does go, and the general consensus is that her position is untenable, even by sources close to her. But she hasn't breached any rules. Gifting watches, Cartier watches, as her legal letter says, it might not be great optics, but it's not in breach of any rules, of any government-owned enterprise rules. So why should she stand aside?
Well, I think the Cartier watches can't be looked at in isolation. What we're looking at is a series of revelations regarding expenditure that have happened after the Cartier watches were revealed, but also in the months previously, whether it was her office amassing a $300,000 credit card bill, the spending on hair and makeup that the story that you broke, Sharri, and also the $34,500 stay at the Grand Hyatt, which in itself presents a conundrum for government entities as well as corporate Australia, because if you've got a CEO who's living in one state and commuting to another state where their head office is located, then there needs to be some form of accountability or mechanism to look at that. I mean, after all, if you look at BHP Billiton, it's stipulated that their CEO must be based in Melbourne, and Suncorp, their CEO must be based in Brisbane. So if you're that's something that needs to be looked at. But you can't look at the Cartier watches in isolation, and no doubt this investigation will have a look at Australia Post's expenditure and get to the bottom of exactly what has happened.
Jared, you used to work at Australia Post, as we mentioned. You were the National Media and Communications Manager for a couple of years, or 2.5 years, from May 2016. So that was partly under Ahmed Fahour's tenure and partly under Christine Holgate's. There was an interesting piece that Robert Gottliebson wrote in the Oz this week. He argued that many of the leaks about this largesse and the expenditure were from disgruntled former staff. The argument was that they've been quite unfair on Christine Holgate. Is your sense from having worked there that she has been unfairly targeted, that there are people there who had an axe to grind or didn't like her?
Well, when I started, Sharri, Christine Holgate, when I was at Australia Post, Christine Holgate had just started. It was in her first year in the job. And she was very busy. She was out touring a lot of the facilities, getting to know a lot of the staff. And one of the main themes among the commentary there, which she even told the media, was the job wasn't necessarily about the remuneration. It was about the privilege of running the postal service. And she saw it as a social service. That was her word. She saw it more as a social service, delivering the mail. Now, somewhere along the line, there has been a disconnect between what a social service looks like versus an organisation that's legislated to run as a commercial entity, which Australia Post is. It is written in legislation that it must run as a commercial entity. Now, in Robert's piece that he wrote, he also signalled privatisation of Australia Post. After all, it's PNG's stablemate, Telstra. It's been 30 years since it's been privatised. As a way to go to sort of remove yourself from this level of scrutiny that you get as heading a GBE, which Australia Post is. Now, whether that's privatised in the form of spinning off its commercial arm, its parcels arm, its non-regulated arm, and then using profits from that to manage the gradual decline of the letters business. I mean, that's definitely something that's up for discussion and something that Robert sort of discussed. But in terms of people out to get Christine Holgate, what I will say is that Australia Post has got, and that's why I joined Australia Post, it has an enormous sense of community ownership. I mean, it's an omnipresent organisation. It has a presence in every main street of every town, and with that comes an intense level of public interest and public accountability, and that's what we're seeing play out now.
Yeah, okay. Jared Lynch, thank you very much, and look forward to your continued reporting on this issue in The Australian.
Thanks very much, Sharri.